Why is it that some contractors get amazing results with Facebook ads and some people don't? I think it comes down to two key concepts that most people don't understand that actually holds them back from getting the results that they want. And that's what I'm going to cover off in today's video. So if you're a residential contractor, you want to generate more work for your business without having to rely on word of mouth, referrals, without having to hire a marketing agency. You just want to be able to do this thing in-house and you want to be the one that's in control. This is a great first step, because I'm going to cover off the two things that I see people get wrong all the time. Whether you're a seasoned pro, I don't see people talking about it, or whether you're brand new or anywhere in between. These are two things you have to understand if you're going to get incredible results. So if you're new here, my name is John Cameron. I started a company called the Contractor Marketing Mastermind. But before that, I was actually running my own contracting business for 7 years. And then, I started the Contractor Marketing Mastermind, where now we've helped over 100 contractors generate millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of work, again, without having to rely on a marketing agency, lead gen site, anything like that. So before we start running ads, you have to understand a few key concepts. And the first one is the nature of the system. So here's what I mean. Would you pay $500 for a lead? It's an interesting question. And most of the time, like I've done this presentation to hundreds and hundreds of people at this point, people think that they would not pay it. But the truth is that a high cost per lead isn't necessarily a bad thing. Paying $500 isn't necessarily a bad thing. And this is where I see people get things wrong. They go, "Hey, what's your cost per lead?" And it's like, "Oh, it's $100, it's $50, it's 25, it's 10, whatever the answer is." Everybody seems to have some sort of an opinion on it, but very few people actually ask the questions they would need to ask in order to understand whether or not it's a good cost per lead or a bad cost per lead. To be honest, I don't really care about the cost per lead. And that's what I'm saying. You got to understand the nature of the system. So most people think getting a high cost per lead is a bad thing, or getting a low cost per lead is a good thing. But it really depends on all of the different aspects of the system. If I ran an ad right now that said, paint your house for $1, I'd probably get a ton of leads that would be for $1, right? Or $10, $5, whatever. Like, it would be a really low cost per lead, but it would be a bunch of people who aren't financially qualified to be able to buy the services. And so I see people running all sorts of ads that actually are just shooting themselves in the foot. They use the wrong bait, and therefore they catch the wrong fish. So you got to understand how the whole system is going to be working together. Now, this isn't to say you shouldn't measure all of the different parts of the campaign, which I'm going to cover off what those parts are here in a second. But it's just you got to keep in mind their interrelationship, how they all work together with the campaign and the company as a whole. So here's an example of a couple of metrics that really matter that you got to be tracking. So cost per lead, lead conversion rate, which is simply just how many of your leads turn into bids or quotes or estimates or whatever you want to call it. And therefore, what is your cost per estimate? Then your booking rate is just, how many estimates you go to versus how many jobs you book. Average job size is just, if you took the total sales divided by the number of jobs, that would be your average job size. And then profitability is, profitability. So you might go to somebody, you might go, "Yeah, I'm getting, leads for $50 a piece." And they say, "Hey, you should have somebody look at it. Like, that's way too high. I get leads for $5 a piece." And to be honest with you, if anybody ever says that to you, it's a dead giveaway that they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about when it comes to paid advertising. They don't understand the interrelationship between all of the different aspects of the campaign. So this here, this is actually very workable. This is a very workable set of numbers for most contractors. What actually matters is how everything works together. And I've seen this happen before where people really try to lower their cost per lead because they feel like it's too high, and they end up in a worse spot. So you could actually go from 50 down to 25, but maybe now you're not converting as many of the leads. Instead of converting 1 out of 5 or 20%, now you're only converting 8%, 8 out of 100 into estimates. And what that means is that your cost per appointment actually goes up. So we lowered the cost per lead, which looks like a win. But then if we look at the lead conversion rate, that also dropped. And so I've ran campaigns where the cost per lead is $100, but the lead to estimate ratio, the lead conversion rate, was like 80%. It's like, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. Or I've also had it where it's $5 leads, $10, $15, those sorts of things, and it ends up being the same kind of cost per estimate. So you have to understand how all of these numbers are working together, because it's not like just cost per lead is working in some sort of a vacuum. So what happens is now your cost per appointment is up. And maybe because of the lower quality leads, you don't end up booking as much. Now, booking rate is mostly a function of your sales capabilities, which maybe I can cover off some sales stuff in another video, but it might impact it a bit. And maybe it attracts lower jobs or smaller jobs. And so now instead of 10K average job size, now it's like 8K. Overall, you're actually in just a much worse spot. Like if these two different people, these two different scenarios, if they both spent 3,000 on ads, one ends up booking 60,000, one ends up booking 40,000. That's a pretty big difference. So you have to understand how all of these numbers are working together. You have to understand the nature of the system if you're going to get the results that you want, because you can be spooked away by a high cost per lead, and ultimately it just doesn't, like, the cost per lead is something to measure, it's something to look at, but it's not the only thing. So in these two different scenarios, profitability wise, 18,000 in profit versus 10,000. So this is definitely a much better campaign. And the same principle of cost per lead doesn't matter, it actually can work in reverse too. You could actually raise your cost per lead, but also raise your lead conversion rate, which ultimately lowers your cost per appointment, and keeping all else the same, you end up with better results overall. So in order to run ads effectively, you need to understand how all of these things are working together. Most people just lose sight of the bigger picture. They just look at cost per lead. They just look at even the number of leads that they're getting, which is kind of tied in, which I'll cover here in a second, but it's how all of these different pieces are working together that actually matters. What matters more than anything is this number here, or really actually this number here. How much do you put in, and then how much profit does it generate? Or how much money do you put into ads, and how much in sales does it generate? That's the only thing that really matters. Like, I would pay $500 for a lead if 100% of them turned into $10,000 jobs. So it's just important that you understand how all of these pieces are working together, because you can definitely get discouraged. And you also have to understand how the math actually works. Some people just aren't spending enough money. Let's say, for example, your cost per lead is $50, okay? And you convert 25% into quotes, you have a 75% booking rate, and your average job is $3,000. Your cost per acquisition, your CPA, your cost to get a customer, would be 8.89%. Now, typically 5 to 10% is pretty normal in like most contracting businesses. If you're higher ticket, those percentages will be a bit smaller, but these numbers are fine. But if you were only spending $10 per day, what that would mean is you would get one lead every 5 days, right? Because your cost per lead is $50. So on average, and it's not like linear, it's not like, oh, I spent $50, I'm going to get a lead. Sometimes you spend $100, you get nothing. You spend $101 the next dollar, and you get 2 leads. So on average, though, you'll get one every 5 days. And because you convert 1 out of 4 into quotes, that means that it'll take you 20 days to just set up one estimate. So I've seen this as well, where people just aren't spending enough money in order to be able to see the full picture, right? They're just seeing, man, I've gotten one lead in the last 5 days. Man, I've set up one quote in the last 20 days. It's like, but man, you're spending $10 a day. So it's going to feel very slow, and it's going to feel like it's not working. But if instead you're spending $100 per day, then you would get 2 leads per day, right? Because 100 divided by 50 is 2, right? So you get 2 leads per day, and you'd set up one estimate every other day. And it's going to feel like it's really working. And this is what your numbers would end up being. You put, or you would end up with an 8.89% cost of acquisition, which is like very, very solid. So you have to understand how all of the pieces are working together. And you also have to understand how the math works. Because again, if you're spending 10 bucks a day and your cost per lead is $50, $50 is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's going to feel extraordinarily slow. It's going to feel like it's not working. You're going to get discouraged because you don't understand how the whole system is working, and you're probably just not spending enough on ads. The second thing to understand is the scientific method. A lot of people will just boost a post. Facebook is always trying to get you to go and boost a post. They're just saying, hey, put 10 bucks in and go serve this ad to 1,000 people, 2,000, whatever. But they're not really following the scientific method. They're not testing ads. They're not trying to find what we call your winning ad. They're just, yeah, I'll just boost this post and see what happens. Oh, I didn't book any work. That sucks. So for the scientific method, all marketing should be viewed as a test. Okay. Now, nobody knows with a 100% certainty what is going to work. Some people say videos work better. Some people say photos work better. We found videos. But in some cases, we ran videos for a client. They worked okay, switched to photos, and they worked really, really well. They actually worked better. So for us, because we've worked with over 100 people with our private clients, we know really well like what's going to work. But sometimes we take the same ad or the same kind of ad, we put it in a different area, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't do quite as well. And then we make a small tweak, and then it crushes. So you have to understand that all marketing is going to be a test. Even if you know what you're doing, you still have to view it as a test. And in order to test effectively and to follow the scientific method, you can only change one variable at a time. And what I mean by a variable is one aspect of the ad. So you can't change the words that you use and the photos that you use and where you're putting the ad, like the targeting. You can't change all of those things and then you won't have any idea what change made the difference. Everything will just essentially be chaos. You won't have any clue. Wait, was it that I had better words in this one? Is it that I used a better video or better photo? Or is it just this combination of it? Like, what is happening? So our goal, whenever we launch ads with our clients, or even when I launch ads for myself, my goal is to find the magic combination of the angle, the copy, the creative, the call to action, the targeting, and the conversion mechanism, the combination of all of these things that will get us the best results possible. And whenever we launch, we typically will launch 2 angles, at least. So here's how the scientific method works in action, okay? So you put these 4 different angles up against one another, okay? For a painting business, let's say you did an interior ad, an exterior, one for decks and fences, and then one that was just a bit more general. These would be the 4 different angles, and you would want to try to keep everything else the same, right? So you'd want to use very, very similar words in your ad, a very similar video. If you can, like the exact same video, the exact same words, except for what service that it's promoting, right? So you might be able to get away with the words and then just change the video a bit, but you want to try to keep as much the same so that you can launch these 4 different ads and then you can identify the winner, right? So you launch them, and then based on which one generates the most sales or the lowest cost per estimate or whatever metrics you're going to use, because that's the other thing about what I was saying before, understanding the nature of the system. You also have to understand where you're at in your advertising cycle, right? Like if you're brand new, you're just starting to run ads, looking at cost of acquisition might not actually be the best thing. You might want to look more at your cost per estimate. So you have to understand how it all works together. But if you identify that the exterior angle right now is the one that's working the best, you take that one and that becomes what is called your control. It's the thing that you are now going to try to beat. So we would take this exterior angle, right? And then what we would do is we would put in new creative. So now we would change out, we'd keep everything else the same about this ad. We'd turn off the other 3. The only thing that we would change is the video or the photo. And then we would run that test and we would see which one works better. And then based on which one works better here, we take the blue, we swap it out with the red, which one works better, That then becomes our new control. And we would repeat this process, but now we might do it for the copy, the words that we're using, right? Or maybe you just stay on this cycle a whole bunch of times. You just keep testing out new creative, new creative, new creative. That's the biggest lever to pull, is the creative. Second would be the copy. So you're just going through this process. You're doing a different conversion mechanism, which is basically just, do you send them to a form? Do you send them to a website? Like, how are you actually converting these leads, these potential leads, into actual leads? So you want to look at that conversion mechanism and see which one works best. Or maybe you could change out the targeting. And essentially all we're doing with this is we're just going to repeat this process until we find the magic combination, until we find what we consider your winning ad, which is the one that you can just pour money into and get incredible results with, right? This is an ad that you can continue to put more in and get more out of. This process is called split testing. And essentially it's just taking a control, taking just one that we know has worked, and we're just letting that run. We're going to continue to let that run, but we're going to just try a variation of it. And every time something performs better, that combination becomes our control. So this is something that if you can understand and you can internalize for yourself, that, okay, I got to understand how the system works. I have to understand and have good tracking for what is our cost per lead? How many of those leads turn into estimates? How many of those estimates turn into jobs? How many of those jobs are at, like, what cost are those jobs at? We have to go through that process. If you can understand that, you can understand, hey, I need to figure out how much money to put into ads. And if you don't know, I have another video on the channel that goes through how to figure out how much money you should be putting into ads based on your business. So maybe I can like link that somewhere here. Check it out. But if you can understand that and you can understand the scientific method, then it's only a matter of time until you find your winning ad. I have not seen a time with a residential contractor where Facebook ads didn't work. I've seen it where they don't work, but then they do work. But really, it just comes down to just viewing marketing as a test and continuing to be willing to do the testing to find that winning ad. Because once you find that winning ad, scaling your business becomes easy. It's really what allowed us to hire more crews and to get off of the tools, because if you know that you can provide enough work for them, all it is just book yourself out and then hire another crew. Now book yourself out again, hire another crew, and like you can just continue to scale. And understanding this really makes a huge difference. So if that was helpful for you, then I'd appreciate if you left a comment down below and just told me what you kind of took away from it. There's a ton of other videos that are on the channel. I'm going to be creating more videos over time as well. But I really hope that you can internalize this and potentially watch this a few times over so you could really just get it. Because if you understand these concepts, it becomes a lot easier to go through that testing process because you see what's on the other side. So with that said, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.